Long, long ago, far beyond the great mountains and deep forests, there was a mighty kingdom called Udanwa. Udanwa was a land of beauty and wonder. Its rivers shimmered like gold under the morning sun, and its valleys were so green that even the birds sang sweeter songs there. The air smelled of honey and wildflowers, and the people lived in peace, growing yams, millet, and maize under the watchful eyes of the hills. At the heart of this great land stood a palace made of mud brick and thatch, where King Akabundu ruled with wisdom and strength. He was a man with eyes like burning coals, a deep voice that echoed like thunder, and a heart that beat for his people. King Akabundu had ruled for many years. Many seasons had come and gone, but now his hair had turned gray like the clouds before rain, and his steps had become slower. But even the strongest trees must one day lean, and there was one worry that troubled the king deeply. He had no son to inherit the throne. His wife, Queen Jinakanwa, had passed away many reigns ago, and though he had daughters wise and beautiful, the laws of Udanwa said that only a male heir could wear the golden crown. The elders whispered about it. The villagers prayed about it. And King Akabundu? He stood at his balcony every evening, watching the sun set behind the hills, wondering who would protect his when he was gone. Yet in Udanwa, something mattered even more than blood. It was loyalty and humility. The people believed that greatness was not in how rich you were or the family you were born into, but in how you treated others when no one was watching. Every child in Udanwa grew up hearing the same words from their grandparents. A proud heart breaks the crown, but a humble one wears it with honor. And though no one could see it yet, deep in the palace kitchens, a quiet story was beginning to rise, one that would change the future of Udanwa forever. On a rainy morning, when the sky wept like a grieving widow, a small boy stood at the gates of the palace of Udanwa. His name was Azuka. He wore no shoes, only old sandals with the soles peeling off. His clothes were torn at the edges, and he carried nothing but a wooden spoon tied to his belt. Azuka had no mother or father. His parents had died during a sickness that swept through the land when he was just a baby. An old woman in the village had raised him, but she too had gone to join the ancestors. Alone and with nowhere to go, Azuka walked for days to the city of Udanwa, hoping to find a place in the king's palace. The palace guards laughed when they saw him. "Where do you think you are going, eh?" one of them sneered. "I only want to work," Azuka said quietly. "I can wash dishes, sweep floors, anything." By the grace of the gods, or perhaps fate, the head cook, a large woman named Mama Taika, passed by at that very moment. She had a round face like a full moon and arms strong enough to stir a pot as big as a drum. She looked Azuka up and down, then turned to the guards. "Bring him in," she said. "Even the smallest hands can make a mighty meal." And just like that, Azuka became the new kitchen servant. Life in the palace was not easy for someone like Azuka. He slept near the firewood shed and worked from dawn until the stars appeared. But he never complained. He scrubbed pots until they shone, fetched water without being asked, and always greeted others with a bow. The other servants often teased him. "You think hard work will make you a prince?" one of them joked. But Azuka only smiled. "I just want to serve well," he would say. "The gods are watching, even if you are not." Inside the palace walls, power danced in secret places. The king's only nephew, Prince Jabari, was proud and spoiled. He wore silk robes and golden rings on his fingers. He never greeted the servants and always looked down on those who had less than him. "Servants are born to bow," he once said, tossing fruit at Azuka's feet. "Don't forget your place." The ministers, too, were a proud bunch, especially Minister Kunto, a sharp-tongued man who didn't trust anyone from outside noble blood. He often watched Azuka with cold eyes. "Humph," he muttered to the others. "Too many flies buzzing around the palace these days. We need less dirt, and fewer orphans. But while some mocked, others noticed. Mama Taika saw how Azuka never wasted food and how he gave his own bread to the mice in the yard. An old guard, Kojo, once caught him mending a broken broom instead of throwing it away. "There's something different about that boy," he said softly. And though Azuka never said it out loud, he had dreams. At night, he would lie under the stars, whispering to the wind, "Maybe I am small now, but one day the gods will lift me high." And somewhere, deep in the forest or far in the heavens, the wind answered. Though Azuka was only a palace servant, his heart was filled with kindness bigger than any crown. Every day after cleaning the kitchen and scrubbing the floors, he would quietly gather scraps of food that were clean but untouched: roasted yam skins, soft bread crusts, bits of stew left in the bottom of the pot. He would wrap them carefully in leaves and slip out of the palace gates at dusk, when no one was watching. He would walk to the edge of the village, where the sick, the old, and the forgotten stayed in broken huts. To a blind man who had no family, Azuka brought warm soup. To an old woman with swollen feet, he brought soft boiled plantains and a smile. To hungry children with dusty faces, he told funny stories as he handed them food. He never told anyone what he did, not even Mama Taika. But people began to whisper, "Who is this boy that comes like the wind and leaves like a shadow? He has the heart of gold, that one." Some said he was an angel. Others said he was foolish. But Azuka never cared for praise. He only knew that his hands could help, and so he helped. One cool night, the moon hung low in the sky like a silver bowl. Azuka had just left a bundle of food near the healer's hut when he heard a strange, painful cry from the forest. He froze. It sounded like an animal, but not like any he'd heard before. Curiosity pulled him forward, step by step, into the dark woods beyond the village. There, under a thorn tree, lay a wounded animal. It looked like a deer, but its eyes were golden and glowing, and its fur shimmered even in the darkness. Azuka gasped. The animal's leg was caught in a hunter's trap, and blood stained the leaves. Carefully, he knelt beside it. "Shoo! It's all right," he whispered. "I'll help you." He broke the trap with a nearby rock, tore a piece of his own shirt, and tied it around the animal's wound. Then he fed it water from his cupped hands. The animal looked at him with those strange golden eyes, and then slowly stood up, limping into the forest. Azuka watched it disappear, thinking it was just a wild creature. He had no idea that he had just saved a powerful spirit, a guardian of the forest sent by the gods. And far above, hidden among the stars, the ancestors smiled. One morning, the people of Udanwa woke to terrible news. King Akabundu was gravely ill. The strong, wise ruler who had led the kingdom for many years now lay weak in his bed. His breath was shallow, and his skin was pale. The royal healers gathered herbs and chanted prayers, but nothing worked. Whispers filled the palace like smoke. "Is this the end of the king? Who will rule if he dies?" The royal family was shaken. The ministers argued day and night. Prince Jabari, the king's proud nephew, paced the halls like a lion in a cage. The people of the land grew worried. But the most surprising moment came when a stranger arrived. She rode into Udanwa on a white horse with feathers in her hair and beads around her ankles. Her voice was like the wind, and her eyes saw far beyond the present. She was a priestess from the north, sent by the gods. The guards led her into the palace, where she stood beside the king's sickbed and poured out sacred water onto the ground. Then she lifted her hands to the sky and spoke. "The next ruler of Udanwa shall not be born of royalty. He shall rise from the dust, clothed in humility. He shall carry the crown with a servant's heart." The room went silent. The ministers stared at each other in disbelief. "What is this nonsense?" Minister Kunto shouted. "Only royal blood wears the crown." Prince Jabari's face twisted with anger. "Are you saying a commoner will rule over me?" he growled. Even the king, weak as he was, opened his eyes slightly. The priestess only bowed and said, "The gods have spoken." That night, thunder rolled across the skies, and lightning flashed over the mountains. Change was coming to Udanwa. And far away, in a quiet corner of the palace, Azuka scrubbed the kitchen floor, unaware that his life was about to change forever. It happened just before sunrise. A loud shout rang through the palace. "Fire! Fire in the Hall of Ancestors!" Servants ran in all directions. Guards blew horns. Flames danced along the roof of the sacred hall, where the king's ancestors were honored, where the most powerful symbols of Udanwa were kept, including the king's sacred staff. The staff was no ordinary stick. It was carved from the ancient tree of voices and tipped with gold. It was said that whoever held the staff with a pure heart would rule wisely. Losing it to the fire would mean dishonor and the end of the royal line. But everyone was too afraid to go in. The heat was too strong. Smoke filled the air. Everyone, except one, Azuka. He had been carrying firewood to the kitchen when he saw the flames. Without thinking twice, he tied a wet cloth around his face and ran straight into the burning hall. "Stop that boy!" someone shouted. But it was too late. He had already disappeared into the smoke. Inside, the fire roared like a wild beast. Azuka's eyes burned. His hands shook. But he dropped to the ground, crawling low beneath the smoke, guided only by memory and faith. There it was, the staff, lying beside the fallen altar. With trembling fingers, he grabbed it and stumbled back out, coughing and gasping for air, his clothes slightly burned but his spirit unbroken. He collapsed just outside the hall, the sacred staff still in his arms. The whole palace stood in silence. Even Minister Kunto said nothing. Later that day, the king, still weak in his bed, was told what had happened. His fingers touched the staff. His eyes, tired and wise, filled with tears. "A boy, a servant, risked his life for the honor of the kingdom," he whispered. The priestess's prophecy echoed in his mind. "He shall carry the crown with a servant's heart." That evening, as the sun bled red across the sky, the king made a bold and shocking announcement. "There shall be a test," he declared. "Not just of blood, but of spirit. All young men in this palace, noble or common, shall face 3 sacred trials: wisdom, courage, and compassion." The room burst into noise. "The crown is not a toy," Prince Jabari shouted. "You dare compare nobles with kitchen rats?" Minister Kunto added. But the king raised his staff and silence returned. "These trials will decide," he said firmly. "Not birth, but worth." The news spread through Udanwa like wildfire. The people buzzed with excitement. Some laughed. Some were angry. But many smiled and said, "Finally, a chance for truth to sit on the throne." And somewhere under the moonlight, Azuka sat alone, holding a cloth to his burnt hand. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, he believed he had a chance. The day of the 3 trials had arrived. From far and near, people crowded outside the palace walls. They sat on rooftops and climbed trees just to catch a glimpse of the young men who would compete, not just for the crown, but for the soul of Udanwa. Among them stood Azuka, dressed in a simple robe, barefoot but calm. Beside him, Prince Jabari wore armor trimmed in gold, his face proud and sharp. 20 palace youths had been chosen, but only one would pass all 3 tests. Trial 1, the test of wisdom. The first trial was held in the Hall of Elders. There, the wise men and women of Udanwa sat in a circle of carved stones. A single question was given to each youth. When Azuka stepped forward, an old man with a voice like dry leaves asked, "A servant steals bread to feed his starving family. What should a wise ruler do, punish or pardon?" Azuka paused, then answered, "Both. He should correct the wrong but feed the hungry. Hunger must not make thieves, and justice must walk with mercy." The elders nodded, murmuring approval. Prince Jabari stepped forward confidently. His question, if two brothers fight over land, who does the land truly belong to? He smirked. "To the stronger one," he said. "The weak must obey." Some elders frowned. One whispered, "Strength without wisdom is like a drum without sound." Trial 2. The Test of Courage. Next came the test that made hearts tremble. Each youth was to enter the Cave of Whispers, a dark place deep in the forest, where the wind mimicked voices and shadows danced like ghosts. At the very end of the cave lay the tooth of a sacred lion, the symbol of royal courage. Some entered and came back screaming. Others never returned at all. When it was Azuka's turn, he bowed his head and stepped into the darkness. Inside, he heard voices. "You're just a servant. Turn back. You will fail." But he kept walking. He remembered the sick woman he once fed, the animal he once saved, the king's staff he once carried. He was afraid, but he walked anyway. That is courage. At the end of the cave, he found the lion's tooth resting on an altar of bones. He took it and returned, his eyes wide, his breath steady. Prince Jabari went next. He returned quickly, sweating and red-faced, but with a lion's tooth in hand. Yet some whispered, was his truly earned? Trial 3. The Test of Compassion. The final test was simple, yet the hardest of all. Each youth was given food, water, and medicine. Then they were sent on a walk through the village, watched from afar. Along the road, they met people who appeared to be beggars, sick elders, and lost children. In truth, these were royal messengers in disguise, placed there to test the hearts of the youths. Azuka, without hesitation, gave his food to a weeping child with dusty feet. He gave his water to a limping man and tore part of his robe to cover a shivering woman. When he reached the end, he had nothing left but a full heart. Prince Jabari, on the other hand, looked at the beggars with disgust. "Out of my way," he snapped. "The king's crown is not for dogs." He ate his food alone, threw the medicine into a bush, and didn't look back. At sunset, the young men returned to the palace courtyard. Drums beat slowly. The priestess stepped forward, holding 3 white feathers. She placed them one by one in Azuka's hands. Wisdom, courage, compassion. The crowd erupted with cheers. Even some nobles bowed their heads. Prince Jabari stood still, his face red with shame and fury. And King Akabundu, still weak but watching from his throne, smiled faintly and said, "The gods have chosen, and so has my heart." The palace had never been so quiet. After the trials, people waited for the final decision, some in hope, others in fear. Just before sunrise, as the mist clung to the ground and the sky began to glow, a strange silence fell over the land. From the forest edge came the sound of gentle hooves, but no one could see who approached. And then it appeared. Walking slowly through the palace gates, glowing faintly under the morning sun, was the same animal Azuka had once rescued. Its golden eyes shimmered. Its fur sparkled like morning dew. Gasps filled the air as it stepped into the royal courtyard, completely unafraid of the guards or the crowd. Then, before the eyes of everyone, it changed. Light wrapped around its body like smoke, and it transformed into a tall, glowing figure. A spirit of the forest, cloaked in leaves and stars, stood before the royal court. The crowd fell to their knees. Even Minister Kunto covered his face in awe. The spirit spoke, its voice like 1,000 winds whispering together. This boy, this servant named Azuka, once gave without knowing who I was. He showed kindness without asking for reward. He served when no one saw. It turned to the king and the priestess. I was the wounded creature he saved. I am the spirit of the old forest, keeper of ancient truths. And I say this now, he is blessed by the ancestors. The priestess bowed. The king placed a hand over his heart. Even the elders, wise and proud, fell to their knees before Azuka. Tears filled the eyes of villagers, nobles, and servants alike. And Azuka? He stood in quiet shock, unsure whether to bow or cry. The spirit stepped forward and touched Azuka's shoulder. Rise, child. Your heart has already made you royal. The day of Azuka's coronation was like no other. Flowers were thrown from rooftops. Children danced in the streets. Drummers played rhythms that echoed through the valleys of Udanwa. Azuka, once a barefoot servant, now stood before the people wearing robes of deep green and gold, colors of peace and strength. A crown carved from the Tree of Voices was placed gently on his head by the priestess. All hail King Azuka, the people cried. But not everyone was cheering. Hidden behind a marble pillar in the palace, Prince Jabari burned with jealousy. This kingdom belongs to me, he hissed. Not to a servant. That night, under the cover of darkness, he gathered a few loyal guards and tried to start a rebellion, a quick attack to seize the throne before Azuka could settle in. But the spirit of the forest, still watching over Azuka, sent a fierce wind that blew out the rebels' torches and confused their path. By sunrise, Jabari was captured and brought before the new king. The crowd gathered, tense and silent. Punish him, someone shouted. He tried to steal your crown, cried another. But Azuka raised his hand for silence. He looked at Jabari, angry, proud, defeated, and said gently, I know what it feels like to be small and unseen. I will not crush you. Instead, I will send you to the far villages, to live among the poor, to work the land, to serve, not as a prince, but as a man. The crowd gasped. Even the ministers whispered, Is this truly a king? Azuka turned to the people and said, A ruler who rules with revenge builds a kingdom of fear. But a ruler who leads with mercy builds a kingdom that lasts. Jabari, too shocked to speak, was led away, not in chains, but with a chance to change. And so, in that moment, Udanwa saw not just a servant wearing a crown, but a king with the heart of a servant. The days after the coronation were like the first warm rays of sunlight after a long night. King Akabundu had slept with his ancestors before Azuka was coronated king. Azuka, now King Azuka I, did not sit on a throne made only of gold. Instead, he walked through the villages, the fields, and the market squares, greeting his people with a smile and kind words. He built schools where children learned not just reading and writing, but stories of courage, wisdom, and kindness. He healed old wounds between families and villages torn by years of suspicion and anger. He listened to the whispers of the wind, the songs of the rivers, and the cries of those forgotten for too long. Under his gentle rule, the kingdom of Udanwa began to prosper. The golden rivers shone brighter. The valleys grew greener. The people laughed more freely. From the poorest huts to the grandest palaces, everyone felt hope. And in the heart of the kingdom stood a king who remembered what it was to be humble, a servant who became a ruler, not by force or fear, but by love. The story of Azuka would be told for generations, a shining example that true power comes not from birth, but from the courage to serve and the strength to care. And so, the story of Azuka, the humble servant who became a king, passed into the hearts of the people. Under the silver moon, villagers would gather by firesides. Mothers and fathers would tell their children of the boy with the servant's heart, who changed the fate of a kingdom. A child would ask, was he really a king? And their parents would smile, eyes shining, and say, true royalty is not born in blood, but shown in deeds. They would tell how kindness can move mountains, how courage can light the darkest caves, and how mercy can build the strongest thrones. In the land of Udanwa, beneath golden rivers and starry skies, the spirit of Azuka lives on, a reminder that greatness grows not from power or wealth, but from the humble hearts willing to serve. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories. Turn on your notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.